On this episode, we bury our failures in the desert so no one will ever find them. Hopefully. Welcome to Save Every Universe. My name is Alec Garcia, and today we have a very special episode, a history episode, and not the kind where the aliens are like, surprised Da Vinci was kidnapped by aliens and that explains everything. It's a different kind of history episode. What have you on the docket today, Robbie?
Well, I thought we would talk about how the pyramids were actually built by aliens. That was my first go. I pitched it to Alec. He didn't like it.
That was my biggest complaint with Assassin's Creed Origins, was that they didn't like have... Well, I guess there was aliens, but they pulled back on it. I wanted like aliens building the pyramids.
Like History Channel aliens.
Yeah, I wanted like a cutscene.
But that's not what we're talking about today. So I have a coworker at my work who actually has witnessed some pretty cool events in history and had his own gaming shop, and he also has his own YouTube channel. And I've been meaning to get him on the show for a while, actually.
Yeah.
So today I thought we could bring him on. Danny, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Danny Cisneros. And I started a game store here in Albuquerque called Gamers Anonymous, and then I sold it to go back to college. I was at the Atari Dig, and during the 80s, it was 1983, locally, I got to see when Atari actually dumped all the cartridges in the landfill. It was being covered by local news, and so...
You actually saw them dumped in as well?
Well, yeah, there was actually there were reporters there.
Yeah.
And, you know, we saw the trucks dumping them in the landfill and crushing them. They were steamrolling them.
And so, and then they poured concrete over. So, for anyone who doesn't know, like previous to the just a short history thing is previous to the game crash of '83, Atari's sales were plummeting for some reasons we'll get into later, and they took a ton of cartridges and dumped them in the desert.
Yeah, correct. And what's funny is that the locals in the nighttime, they would actually go dig them up.
Okay.
And
nice.
they see, I talked to some of the locals.
So they crushed them though, so like people wouldn't like.
Yeah, but the chipsets were still good.
Yeah.
In them. In fact, when they were digging them up, we would see these flattened boxes, but you could open up the boxes and the cartridges look brand new. And this is after 30 years.
Yeah.
But they actually put the concrete on afterwards because to prevent the locals from going and digging up the stuff.
So the reason we are on this topic at all was I had read a Game Informer article, I think before they rediscovered it, because it was, I don't know, I was reading about like these legends that there's a landfill in New Mexico somewhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, can you believe that they're in New Mexico? And I brought it up to Danny, and he was like, oh yeah, I was there. I'm like, wait, what? Because there's like, you can find articles and like, it's kind of, well, we don't know exactly where it is. And there was people who had looked for it in the past.
Yeah.
Nobody believed that there was actually a landfill with all of these Atari games.
And there was wild numbers about how many cartridges were buried. And so there's a quote from factmyth.com. They had an article about it and said the Atari burial was an urban legend for about 30 years until the site was excavated in 2014. It was believed that millions of copies of E.T. were disposed of in the landfill. Atari officials later verified the number to be around 700,000 cartridges among various other titles. Yeah.
So you remember being a kid and actually seeing in the local news... Like, what kind of stuff did they show? Like, what were they showing in the news?
Well, they had consoles there, and the money shot was actually Pac-Man. And it was really sad because these things were in cases, and as they would be steamrolled, they would burst out of the cases.
So just these Pac-Mans.
And so, and I remember seeing, like, the steamrollers going over the Pac-Man cartridges, and, you know, they had, like, a really tight shot on it. And it was heartbreaking, you know, because I actually didn't own one.
Yeah.
During the time, Atari systems were $199.
Yeah.
And so for context, a minimum wage was $3. So if you were to adjust it for inflation, it's like $700 for an Atari system. And so it was just out of range for a lot of people.
And here they are just destroying.
Yeah, and they're just destroying them. And like there was only 2 kids on my block that had an Atari system. Mm-hmm. And it was a full block, like probably every household had kids. And so, like I said, it was like kind of a special thing, and people thought you were rich if you had an Atari.
So, had you followed... We can talk about the history of it a little bit too, but just on point of the story, have you read articles over time and seen some of these like urban legends and stuff?
Yeah, and it's really funny is that the focus has always been on E.T. E.T. is blamed for the video game crash, and in some ways...
And regarded as one of the worst video games of all time.
It isn't necessarily the reason the game market crashed. It's the reason Atari crashed. At the time, there was about 25 million Ataris in each in households, and they printed 25 million ET cartridges.
Oh my god!
And they were expecting everyone to buy it. Everyone, and they expected to sell more Atari units because of the thing. And ET did sell in these high numbers, but the problem was after Christmas time, people started returning them because the game really sucked.
Yeah. And I have a quote here, actually. This is from that same article. This is from the actual developer who had to work on E.T. He said, "We had literally 6 weeks to produce a brand new game, manufacture it, package it, and market it. It was a disaster. I mean, the programmers hated it, and nobody liked the game." Ray Kassar is the guy. He was the CEO of Atari. And that's not 6 weeks to just develop a game. That's 6 weeks start to finish. Develop the game, get it out, get it manufactured, get it into stores, put marketing dollars behind. That's insane. That's really crazy. Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly the way it happened. But it wasn't just E.T.'s fault. So you have to remember at the time, there was a lawsuit against Activision, from Atari was suing Activision.
Okay.
And so Activision won, and they were able to produce games as a third party.
Yeah.
Up until this point, Atari only made their own games.
Yeah.
So everyone saw...
That was something I didn't know, actually. That was one of the facts that I found, is that developers who were from Atari weren't getting credited for the work they were putting in on games, and so they left and formed Activision. I guess I didn't realize that Activision had been around that long, and that's where they came from.
Right.
But, yeah. Continue.
Right, but what happened is everyone got on the bandwagon. It only cost... remember, games were developed by a single person at the time. So, companies like Puppy Chow... or Purina, were producing games.
Yeah.
But these people didn't know how to make games, so what they would do is they would make clones of Pac-Man.
Right.
And whether you like it or not, like half the games on Atari are clones of Space Invaders.
Right.
Even though Galaga seems different, it's a Space Invader clone.
Right.
And so if you look on the back of these boxes, there's only a single picture.
If you're listening to this on podcast, there's a pile of Atari games still in the sealed plastic wrap. But
you can still hold it up for the YouTube.
Yeah, for the YouTube audience.
They only have a single picture of the game, so the consumer didn't know if games were any good. You would look at the cover, it's like, oh, that looks pretty good.
And before this, there wasn't the internet, and there wasn't like magazines and Game Informer and publications where you could go read about and look up and these kinds of things.
There weren't popular ones.
Right.
The media wasn't reviewing games and such.
So it was, you'd look at the back of the box and
you look
say
at the
yes
back
or
of the
no,
box
right?
and look at the picture, and you would take it home, and sometimes you paid $35 for a stinker. And,
right.
Like I said, the bulk of the games were space games, like Demon Attacks and Phoenix and stuff like that. They're all based on the same mechanics as Space Invader. And nobody was really innovating. And so the market was growing really stagnant. It's kind of like if everybody was releasing first-person shooters today. After a while, it just gets old, and people start losing interest in the games, and so...
Well, that kind of happened in the first-person shooter genre when Call of Duty dominated, right? And then it was after a couple of years of that, everyone was adding the aiming down sight, and everyone was adding and then it was the hands climbing up the ledge, and it's there's these mechanics that come in vogue, and pretty soon all the shooters start to feel a little bit the same. It's not to the same degree, I don't think, but similar, right?
You know what I think is interesting, though, is, in just a pure capitalistic sense, normally a stagnant market like that allows an innovator to come out and shine and win.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen here with Atari. I mean, you got home consoles later with the Famicom and stuff, but it didn't happen in time to save Atari, right? There was nobody who came out that championed something.
The problem is that everybody came out. Is that you had consoles by Intellivision, you had ColecoVision. I can't think of every system that came out.
There's a ton of them though.
But there were a ton of them. Even Kenner was working on a video game console, and everyone wanted a piece of that market. Yeah, because it was lucrative. Like I said, you hire a single person to make a game. Yeah. Games sell 50,000 units at $35 a pop. It didn't cost companies that much to produce.
Right.
And so the bigger problem was that nobody was trying to innovate. Everyone's just
there
trying
was
to get
no
in the
check on
market.
quality, right? It was like, oh, people will pay this for this. Let's just throw as much shit into the market as possible, and we'll make a bunch of money.
Right.
And like that's the way some business people think. But for the gamers who are passionately in love with this stuff, it's like they hit a point where they're like, okay, this is bad. Like, where's the quality? I'm gonna go play something else or play something older. That happens, and I don't think business people who don't respect gaming have that realization. Almost they didn't in the late 70s, early 80s, and some of that's happening still today.
The comparison might be the Wii, the Nintendo Wii. So it did have fantastic games by Nintendo,
Right.
But third parties were just throwing shovelware. You know? And
Yes,
so like you would
that's a
look
good
at
call.
the library on the Wii, and you would probably see about 20% of the games are good, and 80% of the games are shovelware.
I remember
that's true.
when I bought a Switch when it first came out, it was like you had Zelda and like you had a couple good titles, and then you went to their e-store library, even on the Switch, even as recent as that, you would look through it and it would have all these like Neo Geo for like, or whatever it was. Like it was like these old games, and then it was like knockoffs of those old games on sale for $1.99, and like that was most of their e-library. It was a little bit like, I think maybe it started with the Wii, but that still hasn't totally gone away. There's a lot of garbage on the Nintendo eStore.
Whether you look at the Wii or you look at the DS, it's just those are examples of where companies were trying to just get in on all the money that's being made, because those Nintendo consoles were generating tons of money.
Right.
It's like, well, we want a piece of that too, you know?
Yeah.
So what I mean by like what I was saying before is like, so on the Wii, right, or on the DS, there's a ton of, I like that shovelware. That's good.
Yeah.
But there were still these shining stars that have managed to keep it in business, right? It's not like that's all the Wii was. It's not like that's all. Even with a flooded market, when they set a baseline here, it allows a developer to shine, right?
Yeah.
And make these gems that helped Nintendo not go out of business and allow them to come back from the Wii U disaster and all that stuff, right? But it seems like here there was nothing at the point of the crash. Nothing came. There was no game that came forward, or there was nothing that could carry them past the.
Well, and the fragmentation of the hardware, I think, was one of the issues, because now you have Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, right? Are
Right.
the big, and PC, like those are like more, and with PC, right? Because it's more open, you have more of that like tons and tons of shit on the Steam store that's just not any good. But if you're looking at consoles, you have those big three, and then among those big three, they're focusing on putting out, for the most part, quality games, right? And back then, though, it was like there was also this avalanche of hardware happening too, so the market was just so fragmented that people didn't know how to sift through it.
Even Atari was releasing new. They had like 5200, and then they have this 7800 coming out.
Oh yeah.
And what's also funny is they had a line of computer systems, but these systems basically were using the same hardware, but in a different shell. For a different market. So it's already a bloated market, and then Atari on top of that is throwing in even more consoles.
Yeah.
And and in addition to that, they weren't really reprogramming the games. Remember, the computer systems share the same hardware as the console systems.
Right.
So they would take the same game, and then they would repackage it in a different box, and then they would sell it again.
Yeah, like this is for the Atari, whatever. But
Were they?
it's the same
thing.
Yeah.
Were they making money off that model?
They were making money off the model.
They had to have been.
You know,
Otherwise,
initially, like they were making a lot of money. But you have to remember that initially, at the beginning, they were putting out quality games.
Yeah.
And then it was sometime after third parties, after these people started, the dog food companies and stuff like that started making games. That you
I
really
forget the
had
name of the character, but it's ridiculous. I saw a screenshot of it. It was like Mr. Bow Wow's Purina Dog Chow game or something.
Yeah, it's after this that I want to say that, like, right now we do have high quality games. Call of Duty games and Battlefield games generally are high quality, but it's the lack of innovation.
Yeah.
It's the fact that games were all clones of one another, so there was not diversity in gameplay. And it's I want to say that with AAA titles now, we're almost getting to that point again. Is that there's a stagnation in that nobody's actually innovating, and it's just a big.
And I almost feel a little bit like, because I think arguably like Battlefield 5 was like the I think that was true, that those games were generally high quality up till Battlefield 5. It was like it finally hit a point where people had gripes about the quality that was being put out by Battlefield. But I think the first-person shooter thing is almost not the flavor of the month right now. It's a more open-world games, and you hear more people talking about that. They got Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, all the Ubisoft games, basically, right? But the open-world, expansive, and grinding, and online service, like, it really does feel like they're all just trying to reiterate on that exact same thing, and the market is getting a little bit fatigued from that. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Before we go into that, I want to ask real quick. So the game crash happened. There was this oversaturation. All this stuff gets dumped in the in the junkyards. And why do you think gaming didn't die?
Well, the crash was only in the United States. So you have to remember that in Europe, there was a thriving market. There was their market was based on computers. And then in Japan, the market was thriving too. Right about the time of the game crash was when the Famicom came out in Japan. And even Sega had released a console called the SG-1000. Okay. And so in other countries, the market was growing. It was over here that it was crumbling. And so, you have to remember that the United States isn't the world.
Right. Sure.
And so, it doesn't matter who would have revived video games in the United States. It would have revived. Because the rest of the world, it was growing.
But it just happened to be the NES once that finally came over, is what
right,
you're saying.
It was the NES.
Yeah. But now, with well-made games, right? Like Mario, the first Mario, is something that holds up to this day.
When the NES first came out, we were used to games where you had a single screen, and basically that was the whole game.
And like the top-down space kind of thing we were talking about.
You had a single screen that you had to get past, and then you were only doing things for score. It was almost magical when you first saw, Mario, because it was like you got to the first flag, and it's like, there's more game.
That's a great point.
Holy
and then you go
cow.
from that first level to that second level where it's the underground with all the blue blocks, and you're like, whoa, that
it was just amazing to see that there was more to it than just a single screen and trying to get all the pellets or trying to shoot all the aliens from the
right.
They were so complicated at the time. And
you saw a jump forward in like music and sound effects, even in that as well.
Atari generally didn't have music in their games. They had like the same explosion sound and everything in all their games. And I think that the innovation came when Nintendo showed us that there's a different way to make games.
Yeah.
What's really funny is that there's also innovation there in the control pad. Everything was a joystick, and if you start looking at like the funky controllers of the 80s, like none of them are logical. They're squares, and they have like little dial-up buttons on them and stuff like that. And Nintendo distilled it to a single pad with a couple of buttons and it was logical.
We talked about in our strategy guide episode. Remember, I had these old guidebook things, and it was like from the Atari era and stuff. It was the pre-Nintendo era, and they had all this information. We were doing research about that, and we found all these funny quotes about when it was transitioning toward that NES with the gamepad, and people were like, if it doesn't have a joystick, it doesn't count, and that's not how you play video games. All these weird prejudices that are like, man, that we think are silly now. But
and you remember Tony when he brought in his Atari, you guys were making fun of me because I didn't own an Atari, so I was putting the joystick on a table. Yeah, I didn't hold it with my other hand. That doesn't make sense. And then I was using my finger to do the button like this. And you guys are like, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, what are you doing? And they're like holding it. And I'm like, that's uncomfortable. Why would you hold the controller that way? Yeah, I mean.
So the only thing that they did with the Super Nintendo is they added the trigger buttons on the top and a couple of extra buttons. But all modern controllers are based on that
Super Nintendo.
On that Super Nintendo model.
Yeah, they added a shoulder buttons.
They added the analogs and they've added the trigger buttons, but everything's based on the Super Nintendo controller nowadays.
That's really, that thing feels just so good even to this day.
The retro, the classic one that came out, they nailed it. Like when I pulled, it was my son's. Dude, but when I pulled it out of the box, I was like, oh.
And playing like Link to the Past on that, it just feels so right and so good. Yeah. But as we move toward closing up, I want to do a little futurist speculation, and we've touched on it a little bit here. Do you think we're headed for another game crash? We've kind of touched on a couple points along the way. It's not going to be
a game crash as in the 80s. What you're going to see is a larger third parties crashing. And The reason being is because actually this generation of gamers are really spoiled.
Yeah.
Because you have to remember that.
You hear that?
We've talked about
Whippersnappers.
that quite a bit. Yeah.
Back in the 90s,
Yeah.
we paid $50 for a game. And each game had a team of about 6 people that made it. So they didn't spend
Right.
tens of thousands of dollars on a game.
Yeah.
When you stop and you think about Mortal Kombat, it sold millions of units.
Yeah.
And it cost pennies to make. Now you have a staff of 200 people.
Right. Entire floors of skyscrapers and stuff. Yeah.
Making these games,
Yeah.
and you guys are only paying $10 more
Right.
than what we were paying back then.
The price has not gone up. It's been
Right.
$60 for a long time.
And so, you know,
before
one
it
of the
was
things
40 or
that
50
does
or
kind of
whatever,
bother me about some of today's gamers is companies have to figure out a way to make more money.
Right.
Or they will close down.
Yeah.
And they do this by putting out a basic game, and then they sell you the additional content, and this helps make up for the price of development.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you'll read online is that basically people want all this content and they want it for free, and they want to pay $30 for it. You know.
Right. And what we've talked about that, and in other, it seems like they're borrowing from like traditional MMO models, but like as Robbie always says, the traditional MMO model is a monthly subscription, and people don't want to pay monthly subscription.
Right.
They don't want to pay for DLC. They don't, but they want to play it forever, and they want there to be new content. It's like
it's crazy.
It's not how that works.
Yeah, you know, like there was I know this was kind of controversial, but Capcom had released a Street Fighter, and they had basically you were paying for 10 characters. But on the disc, they had like another 6 or 7 characters.
Oh yeah.
And you had to pay to unlock them, but they were on the disc, and people were fuming.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, way back in the day, Street Fighter was released on a 16 meg cartridge, which cost us $74, and we got 8 characters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
and I thought to myself, I don't mind giving Capcom the money because I enjoy their game, and I want them to be financially fiscal, you know. I don't
if
want
the base game is quality, really, like, yeah, I mean, people talk about that with like Warframe all the time. They're like, I buy things even though I don't necessarily, I mean, yeah, it's a cool skin or whatever, but I just want to support this developer.
Yeah.
And I love Division 2 so much that I bought the season pass, and you were like, what do you get with that? I was like, I have no idea. I just love this game so much, and I think they did a good job with it. I just want to give, I can't give them enough money because I'm loving
you
this
don't
game
have it.
so much.
If you had more, you'd give them more. Yeah. I bought the
So if the
season
base
pass, too.
experience they deliver on it, yeah, I agree. You want to support that developer and buy into whatever they're making, and yeah.
Right. So the game market's not going to crash, but you will see some of the larger publishers crashing.
Which we're seeing now, right, with like layoffs at EA and Activision,
Right.
and we've seen the collapse of a ton of like Telltale, and there was like a bunch of studios in 2018 that shuttered their doors or they got bought out by Microsoft. So I think we're seeing like this consolidation kind of thing.
For every developer that crashes, you'll also see somebody that comes out and starts to grow because people like their games. You know, like they might be a little indie company now, but they could probably be the next Naughty Dog in the next 10 years. Or
Well, Respawn is doing great,
Yeah.
right? They came out with Titanfall, and that was their first release, but they're
and then
killing
Apex
it.
Legends.
Yeah, now Apex Legends, and then they're coming out with the next Star Wars game that everyone's really excited about.
And even look at like Hello Games, for all their faults in the launch of No Man's Sky. They went from a mobile game with Joe Danger, and they leveraged that money into a AAA title, fell on their faces, and then picked it up and said, okay, we got to learn how to actually do this thing. And they've grown from a very, very small team and then focused on putting out quality as well.
You know, to your point earlier, Danny, too, it's interesting to me because so we're getting indie games, or even like not indie games, like the newest Mega Man, right? It was like $40, and it's more game than you would have paid for Mega Man back in the day.
Yeah.
And it looks beautiful, and the graphics are great, and I loved Mega Man 11. I
Yeah,
thought it was really
yeah.
cool, and I only paid $40 for it. That's full price. That wasn't like I got it on sale.
Yeah.
So like it's like games. Even the indie games are better. Probably have and we're paying less for them than we would have paid like in the 90s, which is pretty crazy to me. Because indie games are often like $40. They're not even $50 or $60. They're
Well,
like
and you can find
reduced
some
price.
really good indie games for like $15-$20 too.
Right, and that's I'm not even counting like sales or Humble Bundle or any of that stuff. Like you can get even better deals.
Well,
on
Cuphead,
it.
like Cuphead, is $20. It's always been $20, and it's like one of the best side scroller shooter games.
Yeah,
of,
Cuphead's
like, in a
another
long
great
time.
example.
Yeah.
So you're
you
right.
know, like
These kids are spoiled.
The market will just keep going on. But we might have a market that doesn't have EA in the next 10 years, or even Activision. But we'll have the next way forward, or
right.
Those will start becoming the big companies because they're the only ones that focus on gameplay. These are people that are making games not because they're thinking about it fiscally, but they're in the market because they love video games. And
you mentioned Naughty Dog too. They're not a small studio; they're a big studio, but they focus on putting out a quality game, and it comes out when it's ready. And it's more that kind of approach instead of these EAs and Activisions that are just trying to churn things out.
Well, because even though they're big, they're still passionate. They still are doing it for the right reasons. Yeah. I think in any creative field, like if that force is always going to win out over the pure fiscal motivation.
Thank you for listening to Save Every Universe. If you enjoyed this episode, please share us with a friend. If you'd like to support us financially, you may do so at patreon.com/Save Every Universe.
Also, go check out Danny's channel. He has a channel. Oh, yes. I don't know if we said what it was at the beginning. Know Your Video Games.
We'll put it in the show notes too.
It's really cool. It's Danny does really cool animation for it and does a lot of walkthroughs and shows these old games. Talks about their historical impact. Does a lot of cool comparisons. He records voice work and lines it all up. It's a really well done channel. So go check him out. It's
Know Your Games.
Yeah, Know Your Game. Know Your Video Games.
Know Your Video Games on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
Thanks for being here, man.
My pleasure.